Hello to and welcome to this Cycling Life Leadership Bytes. Today I am talking with one of the riders that was one of the youngest when he arrived, but he is still professional. He races for the WorldTour team Trek-Segafredo, American from Seattle, Kiel Reijnen. Welcome, Kiel.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're more than welcome. And like I said, in my research, I found that you were one of the youngest. Just introduce yourself a little bit. What was your route towards Trek-Segafredo?
Yeah, so I grew up on a small island outside Seattle, and there was certainly a number of people that rode road bikes on the island for commuting to work, that type of thing, but there wasn't a cycling culture. It also was not in my family, so I wasn't predisposed to the sport. That being said, I had very supportive parents, and so when the local bike shop actually helped me discover the sport late in high school, I had a lot of people around me to help encourage me and get me in the door of cycling, but I didn't have the connections or resources to be at an advantage at a young age. So I started rowing crew in high school. That was my sport. By the time I got to maybe junior year of high school, I saw that I wasn't going to be big enough. I just wasn't growing as much as some of the other guys. And so to do it at the Olympic level, which was what I dreamed of when I started, didn't seem plausible. I tried really hard. I tried to make up for the deficits that I had in size, but at some point you realize that you physiologically, you might have different talents. And so that's when I started riding my bike a bit more, originally for cross training for crew. And then I did a couple of local criteriums over in Seattle at the encouragement of the bike shop, and I got hooked. So those local races led to more regional races. It wasn't very popular to ride a bike. I was definitely the only guy in my high school who was riding a road bike. And so it wasn't a social activity for me. It was a means to an end. And what I wanted was to reach a really high level in some sport, and cycling, I got bitten by the bug, as they say, and I grew even more enthusiastic over the course of about a year and a half before I managed to make my way over to your program in Belgium. And that was just due to the encouragement of a coach and some connections, and that's how my path started. Belgium was a shock to the system, for sure. It is a Eurocentric sport, and even though I've been doing this professionally for over a decade, I regularly feel that. I'm made aware of that. I have a lot of supporters back home, but this is not. It's easier to check your ego when the people around you aren't enamored with what you do. So a lot of athletes in the US fall into that trap where, if you're a football player, basketball player, you're a hero, and it's easy to get wrapped up in that. And one of the things that I feel lucky with in my career is that I come over to Europe, I see how my teammates are treated, I see how popular the sport is, but then I get an ego check when I go home and I realize nobody's paying attention. Nobody knows what Flanders Classics are. They don't care how I placed in the Basque Country. And I think that overall, that leads to a healthier relationship to the sport, and it's just a good reality check. Mm-hmm. So it's not something that I'm disappointed about, but it's also more difficult for us to live over here, to be over here. All those types of things play a role.
So when you say live over here, you mean living in Spain, huh? You live in Spain for the moment. And because of the coronavirus, you could not bring your family here. Is that correct, what I'm saying?
Yeah. So this has been the longest stint that I've been without my daughter. It is part of the job sometimes to be away from family. And that started from a young age. It's one of the things that I think when I quit racing, I'll look back and there's only a handful of things that I will regret. Missing out on the college experience. I did go to college, but I was racing and training full time during my 3.5 years in school, and I didn't have time to meet new friends, go to parties. You know, I had a community, but it was all based around the bike. And so that, as important as that was, I did miss out on experiences. I lost girlfriends over, being away for months at a time. And now there's chunks of time where I don't get to see my family, both, my extended family and also my wife and daughter. So those are the probably only things that I will regret about having chosen to do this. It's been a very challenging 12 years. I think as you grow as an athlete, new challenges are always arising. And so from that standpoint, it really beats the hell out of a desk job, because there's always something new to sink your teeth into, something new to battle towards. And I'll definitely miss that part of the sport when I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Are there any habits or experiences that, since you're a sporter, that will continue to happen? Certain habits that you say, like, well, that's from my sporting life that I will continue to execute?
Yeah, the biggest example I can think of, actually, ironically, doesn't have to do with cycling, even though that's what I've spent most of my life doing. When I started rowing crew, that's an East Coast sport, so there's a lot of tradition around it, and one of the sort of unique things about crew is practice starts at 5 in the morning, and as a high schooler, to get up at 4:30 every morning so that you can get to practice by 5 means you're going to bed at 8 o'clock. That's not typical. High schoolers sleep in on the weekend. They're lazy. They stay up late. They play video games. I learned to be disciplined because of that. My crew coach at the time was very strict. He was very driven himself, and he wanted the most out of us. And so that experience really shaped me as an athlete. And I think that it's stuck with me through cycling, and I'm sure it will continue to stick with me for the rest of my life. So
can you just in short explain that sport, crew, or whatever, what do you call it?
Yeah, so rowing, essentially. You are in either an 8, 4, 2, or 1-man boat. I primarily rowed in a 2-man sculling boat or the 8-man sweep boat. And I rowed bow because I was the smallest guy on the team. And the practice started at 5. We often did 2-a-day practices. So that was another thing that I was familiar with when I started riding already, was the idea of going out twice during the day, which there's a handful of sports that do that, like swimming, but it's not very typical. Then just the routine of it, we were working all winter long without going out on the water. So there was this huge amount of preparation before you were even allowed to get in the boat. And so you really had to earn that right. And I think that taught me that, nothing's just a given. You have to appreciate that it takes time to get there. And also starting on small teams, I credit that with some of my mentality as well. These young guys who go straight from the junior ranks to the World Tour, they don't know what it's like to race with, 3 kits and, 1 bike for training and racing. So appreciating, what you have, learning to work with the tools at your disposal, and not just wishing you had more is something that I think generations coming through now are missing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, exactly, they are. But I mean, it's also, I don't say the fault, but all teams bring more stuff now. So nobody is questioning where that comes from. I mean, I think a lot of sporters think it comes out of heaven, and that sponsorships grow on trees, which is not the case, obviously. But yeah, I totally see that point. So if you look at yourself now and you're aware of who you were and what you were, how did your mind shift, if it did shift? How and because of what did you see a mind shift for yourself?
I think that one of the most interesting things about the sport of cycling is that it is a very much a team sport. It relies heavily on teamwork. The guys you see winning, they don't win without the other riders helping them. However, no teammate can pedal your bike for you. And that's not true of a lot of sports, a lot of team sports. When one guy's having a bad day, the team can kind of carry him through that game. And in cycling, if you don't have it that day, you'll get time cut. You will be out of the race. And so there's this core, that is an individual effort, but at the same time, it relies on a team effort to have the result. And I think that the thing that I'll take most away from cycling is that mind shift you're talking about, is seeing how when you come together as a team, the result you achieve far exceeds what the individual can, even though at the core it is this individual effort. So I think that was a real epiphany for myself, and one that I hope I take into whatever career I do next, because that's true everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The sum of all the parts is greater than the individual parts. So I want that mentality to stick around.
Could you give us an example and that for you happened and kind of like testifies that teamwork, or the result that was in a way built on the teamwork? Could you, for the audience, give an example of that? Would that really happen?
I think it's really easy to point to, when someone says, what are your most memorable, points of your career? Everyone says, oh, the time I won, such and such race. For me, the first example that comes to mind is actually a race we didn't win. We were at Tour of Kinghai Lakes. The conditions were incredibly miserable. We're up on the Tibetan Plateau in China. When it rains up there, you're at 14,000 feet. That's 4,000 meters. I mean, we were way up there, and a lot of people were getting food poisoning, so everyone was pretty much sticking to eating rice. And it was a really long race. I think it was 13 stages. So it was a challenging circumstance. And we went to that race. This is quite early on Jelly Belly, and early in my professional career. And we had no right to win that race, but we went in with 6 guys who were, like this. I mean, we were just a really tight knit group. 3 guys were out with food poisoning in the first 2 days, and all 3 of them decided to stay with the team for the remainder of the race. That's nearly 2 weeks in China, and they couldn't race. And you know what they did? They did the laundry, because there was no laundry service. You had to do it in your hotel room. They made the bottles. They helped the soigneurs. They went to the side of the road and would cheer us on and hand out bottles on the climbs. They were there for morale, and because they felt like they owed that to the team. Just because they couldn't be in the race didn't mean they couldn't contribute. In the end, I got 3rd on GC, and I was 4th going into the very final stage. The final stage was a flat circuit race. There was not supposed to be any changes in GC. There were 3 time bonuses, and our team, which was down to 3 of us, spent most of the race just getting our butts kicked. And I was doing my best to hang in. Luckily, I'd been training at altitude, so I had half a chance. But on this circuit race, we took control of the race from the start. We had 2 guys riding, myself sitting on, and we rode back each break that went away in time for the bonification sprint. And I had to take all 3 bonuses, otherwise I wouldn't have enough time to move up. And we pulled it off, and I got 3rd by 1 second. And it was highly improbable, but it was a great example of how, a team of 6 guys came away with a result better than one guy could have got. And the fact that those riders stayed on, even though they had a choice to go home and, do something better with their time, they chose the team first.
Yeah. Wow. That's a very nice example. Thanks for sharing that. So you were one of the youngest guys ever in my program. You were first year Espoir, and now I'm talking to a very seasoned professional cyclist, but I'm also talking to a father. And when I understand you very well, a second baby is on the way, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
So,
Yeah.
so can you share a little bit about how this is, involving, changing your life now that you're still a cyclist, and maybe in perspective towards later? Can you give us some insight there?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a chicken or the egg argument to be had. Do you become a professional cyclist because you're determined and driven, or is it the other way around because you're a professional surrounded by people who are also trying to become professionals, that you become driven and focused? I don't know the answer, but I do know that I spent a large portion of my sporting career with an immense amount of determination. I had one goal in the beginning, to become professional. My next goal was to make it to the top of the professional ranks, be in a Division I team. And I wanted to do a grand tour. And I another big dream of mine was to go to the Olympics. I have not managed that yet, but I did do the World Championships a couple of times. So it was very single focused for a large part of my adult life. And that meant no distractions. That meant a lot of sacrifices, not just for myself, but from the people in my life. Once I became a father, there was a serious shift. And it wasn't that I took the sport any less serious. I still do my training. I still show up to time, work on time. I still care about the result, but I had to achieve a balance that up to that point in my life, I had not managed to achieve. And maybe that made me a better athlete. I don't know that there's an advantage to always being so single-minded. Being hyper-specialized can be detrimental at some transition points. And having a daughter, wanting to be a good father, was definitely a point in my life where I stepped back and made a conscious effort to reorient the way I approached sport. Mm-hmm. So it would be safe to say that I don't get as upset when the workout doesn't go the way I want it to. I don't get as frustrated when, the race plays out and we don't have the result we were hoping to go home with. There's always going to be another race. There's always going to be another training, and not getting too wrapped up in that particular result can give you a better perspective. And there's other things in my life that are more important than that individual day of training or racing. So I think that when we're balanced humans, we make for more balanced athletes. That can mean better consistency. You don't get the highs and lows. It can also mean, level-headed decisions in the race. If you're racing with too much pressure, you see a lot of times, big champions, they have everything to lose and very little to gain. And the underdog who has nothing to lose and everything to gain will win, because they're not, their mental process isn't like, okay, how do I, make sure that I don't screw this up? They're thinking, I've got the opportunity. And that's a very big difference. So in some ways I found fatherhood to be freeing. In other ways, it made being a professional athlete a lot more difficult. I sleep less. She comes first, not myself.
Yeah, well, it makes total sense. And as you said, I try to explain to everybody the ability to win, or guys that come to the big level, they can win, but that's a complete different approach than when you are the star and you almost have to win. It's both the same. It's crossing the line first, but there is a huge difference. And a lot of people, I think all the people that are not in that situation do not understand what that type of pressure can do with you. And then, yeah, I think the art is that you have a way to get away from that pressure. And I think in your case, then it's partly being a father, knowing like, well, winning or losing is important, but back home there's more important stuff. Does that bring it together?
Yeah. I mean, when I win or lose, my daughter still wants to talk to me on the phone after the race.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's for sure. And I remember that when you were here, you were super focused because, like you said, you grabbed every chance as if it was the last chance, so to speak. So that was, yeah, it's nice to hear where you come from, and then that you went through all those steps and do what you're doing now, which is being professional in a way that you support your family. Where I think
maybe perhaps call it a more sustainable version of being professional.
Yeah. And
3 races, though it's your last, it's a huge weight on your shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now you are, let's say, in the last part of your active cycling career. It can still go for some years, but at least it's at least the second part of your active cycling career. How is there a difference in feeling, except being a father, but just how much do you think about the future? Whether in cycling or outside cycling, but how much is that part of your thinking?
Certainly, it takes up more of my prefrontal cortex than it used to. I think every athlete has insecurities, all the way from the bottom rungs of the pros to the top. It's amazing to me how many guys question their ability to do this on a daily basis. It's one thing when I feel myself question that, but when you see a guy at the pinnacle of the sport winning the Tour de France and he's questioning, am I capable of this? It's an asinine question. It's ridiculous. But the reality is that we have insecurities. And as you get further towards the end of your career, those insecurities don't disappear. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I still every year wonder, am I going to be good enough to get a contract? It's just a perpetual paradox. And I think that I definitely spend more time at this point in my life thinking about the next phases, but you also, you have a change in role. And so, now on the team, one of my big roles is mentoring the young riders, playing road captain, strategy, those types of things, because you have the experience to do it. The courses, the players, the ability of your team. And that's a really important skill set too, and one that the teams value and need. And so it's not just that as you see your sort of peak ability dissipate, that you realize that your worth is going down. You have other worth, and you can transition into these other roles. And sometimes that's when guys hit their stride. So I definitely enjoy some of the new roles I've been taking on. And I appreciate sort of the role I fit in now with the team.
Okay, so we're going to the end. If I would ask you, what are the 3 main, like say, takeaways you would give the audience? Because most of the people are riding for fun. They do competition, but what would be your takeaways? And even for young people that are aspiring a pro career, can you lighten that up a little?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that I'm sure made a difference in my ability to do this as a career was determination. And determination means everything from a willingness to invest in yourself when no one else will. When I signed my first pro contract, I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I was broke. I lived on a futon, and the first investment I made on that small pro cycling salary was to go buy a mattress, and so that that proved that I was willing to invest in myself because I believed in myself. And I think that belief in yourself kind of goes hand in hand with determination. Every time you run into a wall, don't back away. You got to try and break through it first. Maybe you'll never break through it, but you have to at least try. The second thing is accountability. I really believe in defining roles, defining purpose, setting that structure up so that when at the end of the day, when the race is over, you can look back and say, okay, did I do X, Y, Z, the three things that the team asked me to do? And at the end of the day, if you can say, yes, I was accountable for those three things, then you will make progress. It doesn't mean it'll work out every time. It just means that you will make progress. The last thing, and perhaps the most important thing it took the longest to learn, is that dissolution of ego. So I think to become professional, you have to have that belief in yourself, but you also have to recognize that it's not about being the best, period. It's about getting the most out of yourself, because there's always somebody better than you. And I don't care if you won the Tour de France 7 times. The guy who's probably the most talented cyclist in the world never picked up a bike. It's not about that. It's about, can I look back and say, yes, I got the absolute most out of myself. And if you can do that, it doesn't matter whether you only made it to an amateur crit racer or you won the Tour de France. You can go forward in your life without ever having to look back again. You can check the box off. You don't have to live with regret. So I hope, I don't know, but I hope that at the end of my career, that's what I can say to myself is, I got the most out of myself. And I know that, having done this for as long as I have my ego is a lot smaller than it used to be. This sport is full of highs and lows, and every time you think you're on cloud 9, you're in the ditch with a broken collarbone the next week. So it's very important to not let your ego get too far in front of you.
Wow, that's impressive, Kiel. Thanks for sharing that, because to me, those are very worthful takeaways. And too bad. I think we need to finish our talk here. Kiel, I thank you so much. And for the audience out there, keep looking at this Cycling Life Leadership Bytes. We will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.